Thank you for all of those good songs today. We've eliminated some of the congregational singing because we, again, don't want to project any kind of sickness in our church. But let's welcome those around the world. We've just tuned in to 10 television stations, Roku, church app, Facebook, live stream, and all around the world. People are watching this broadcast by the thousands by the end of this day. Let's welcome them right now and say thank you for coming and watching our broadcast. I did direct your attention to the book of Luke, chapter number 22. I'd like to begin reading a story about our Lord going to the Garden of Gethsemane. It's in chapter number 22 and verse number 35. And he said unto them, when I sent you without purse or scrip, a scrip was like a bag or a wallet, and I sent you without a purse, scrip, and shoes, lacked you anything? He's talking to his disciples. They said, nothing. Then he said unto them, but now, he that hath a purse, let him take it, and likewise his scrip, and he that hath no sword, watch this, let him sell his garment and buy one. For I say unto you, that this is that is written must yet be accomplished in me. And he was reckoned among the transgressors, for the things concerning me have an end. He's referring to the cross. And they said, Lord, behold, here are 2 swords. And he said unto them, it is enough. I don't know a time in my 42 years of preaching when I have been asked this question more than I have been in the last 6 months. Is it biblical for Christians to defend themselves? Believe it or not, it's a very controversial subject. In views, and you can take and adjust what personally you feel comfortable in your spirit for your life, your family, and your future. When you see the setting of our text, it's a very busy chapter here. In verse 1 through 6, it's where Judas sets up a plan to betray Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. From verse 7 through verse 20, Jesus locates the place where him and his apostles are going to have what we recognize as the Last Supper. From verse 21 through verse 30, Jesus is explaining his betrayal to his apostles, while at the same time they're fighting over who was going to be the greatest in the kingdom. So in the midst of all this stuff kind of flaring up, Peter steps up in verse 31 through 34 and says, it doesn't matter what everybody else does. I tell you what I'm doing. I'm going all the way with God. And Jesus said, before the cock crows 3 times, you're going to deny me. Then on the Lord's journey to the Garden of Gethsemane, he addresses an issue that I read to you, the text in verse 35 through verse number 38, about this controversial subject about self-defense. Now, when you deal with self-defense in the context of the Bible, you must notice several important concepts when addressing this issue. I want to show them to you as a means of introduction for the Bible. Verse number 36, Jesus said, at one time, I took care of your shoes, your clothing, everything you ate. But he said in verse 36, but now. Do you see that terminology? He was referring to the fact that the changing of times demanded a changing of one's ability to protect themselves. There was a time in America when you could leave your home unlocked. I remember as a child sleeping in my grandfather's house, and the only door he shut was the screen door. I'm talking about all night. And the only reason why he put a latch on it was to keep the dogs from putting their nose in the screen door and open it and coming in the house. He slept with his windows open. He had a 55 Chevrolet, Brother Charles, and back then you could leave the key to the on position, pull the key out, and you could start it and run it without the key. Papa never took the key out of his car. He never locked the doors of his car. Did you know, ladies and gentlemen, there was a day in America when nobody locked the church house. Churches were never locked. People were encouraged all hours of day and night to come and to pray and to spend time with God. You leave a church unlocked now, when you come back, the pews will be gone, the PA will be gone, there'll be pornography on the walls, they'll abuse everything here. What I'm trying to say is, there may have been a time in America when you didn't have to have a gun to defend yourself, but now, times are changing. People are crazy. Society is godless. Politicians are ungodly. Police are under distress. I want to say to you as a pastor, get you a license, get you a gun, buy you some bullets, but now, there may have been a time when you could take a vacation without a gun. I know there were times like that, but now, you go in a restaurant, you don't know if you're going to get shot, run over, beaten. You can't go to the store anymore, park in parking lots. It is crazy what's going on in this country. So Jesus was telling them, we're about to face a different time. You have not had a sword up until now, but now I want you to get one. Verse number 37, something else. He said, the reason why I want you to get a sword is because the land is filling up with transgressors. Do you see that? Meaning that men were getting more bold and wicked and were more aggressive. Therefore, we must be more aggressive in our defense. Let me illustrate. I never imagined in all of my life that I would ever be scared of stopping at a red light and somebody blocking my car and opening my doors and jumping on the roof of my car and not letting me go through that red light. I never dreamed that would happen in the United States of America. And by the way, I know it's on TV and I may get thrown off, but I want to tell you something. When that light turns green, when the light turns green, you better clear your tail out of the road or I will run you over. Now, when the light is red, that means you have a right to cross the street. When the light is green, that means I have a right to cross an intersection. And I don't care what kind of mask you have on. I don't care what kind of tag you have on. I don't care what kind of t-shirt you have on. And I don't care what kind of poster you're holding. When that light turns green, by law, I'm running you over. Now, I'm sorry it's gone to this. It should never be this crazy. Somebody sent me a video yesterday of a motorhome that stopped because they blocked the road. And 20 of these idiots got on top of the motorhome and were stomping in the roof of it. I'm talking about a $150,000, $180,000 motorhome. They crawled up the ladder in the back. They're standing on top of it, stomping it. They blocked the road where the guy couldn't go anywhere, and they were opening up the bins on the side that were go underneath, and were throwing everything out in the road that was underneath his motorhome. And the man sat there because he didn't want to hurt anybody. Now, that's a choice he made. That's fine. I'd have put the pedal to the metal, and I guarantee you one thing. So we are living in times when people are more aggressive and they're more wicked. I remember a time if somebody was a homosexual or a lesbian, it was private, they were ashamed of it, and nobody knew about it. Now they'll hold hands and kiss out in public. I'm saying to you, we're living in a day where sin has no consciousness anymore. People are proud to be ungodly. And because of that, we have now got to pick up an opportunity to defend ourselves. Now, notice this in verse 38. I know some of you are already mad. I really don't care. I don't care. I don't care. Now, this is something else that's very important as my introduction. Notice what he said in verse 38. Jesus said, I want you to sell your garment and get a sword. And one of the disciples said to him, we have 2 swords. Now watch what Jesus said. He said, that is enough. Now I want to ask you something, Brother Spears. How can 2 swords be enough when they were 11 apostles standing there? There were 12 apostles, but Judas has gone now to betray Jesus in the temple. So there's 11 apostles there. And Jesus said only 2 swords were enough. Why didn't Jesus say we need 9 more? Why did he say 2 was enough? The reason why he clarified that is because he was showing us that not everybody needs to own a weapon. Not everybody deserves a gun. People with mental issues do not deserve a gun. People that are militia and anti-America do not deserve a gun. These people coming over from other countries and wiping out our people, going into mosques and churches and places of employment and restaurants, people like that do not deserve a gun. You've got to rightly know how to handle yourselves. So we are living in a wicked day. Those of us that are tax-paying, law-abiding citizens, you are protected by the Constitution. You have a right to own a weapon to protect what God has given you. Now, Jesus proved that these two swords was not to protect him, because he had already told them, my end is coming. I'm going to the cross. So why did he give them the swords? He proved it wasn't to protect him, because remember, when Judas came with a mob, one of the men named Malchus ran his mouth, and Judas took the sword, and the Bible said he cut his ear off. And Jesus reached down and picked up his ear and put it back on him again, signifying that the swords were not to defend the Lord. He wanted them to have the swords, Brother Ron, so that after he was crucified, resurrected, and went back to heaven, he knew times were going to get worse because they had rejected God. And he's saying, you may not think you need the sword now, but when I'm going back to heaven, it's going to get worse and wickeder than it's ever been. And you better get something that'll protect you, what you own, your family, and what this nation stands for. And I say amen to that. Now, I'm laying a foundation. Before you ever think about using a weapon, I want to talk to you. I have used one. I've had them used on me. So I have been on the other side of the gunpowder. You know, it's one thing for somebody to talk about jail, but it's another thing to talk to somebody that's been on the other side of the bars. When it comes to defense and weapons, it's the same way. You may think you have it all figured out if you've never been on the other side of the gunpowder. So before you even think of the aggressive use of a deadly weapon, there's several things I want you to make sure of. Number one, make sure the gun and the bullets that you have are legal according to the Constitution and the laws of the land. Let me illustrate. One of the men in the church that I was saved in years ago shot a man that was breaking into his home. It was completely legal self-defense. It was ruled he had broke no law. The man busted through his door, came in on him, motorcycle gang. He took a .38 with hollow points and pumped 3 shots in his chest. I went down there, pulled the man out on the porch, and waited for the police. And matter of fact, I embalmed him. And he killed him, and everything was justifiable and legal. But he still went to prison. But he didn't go to prison for shooting the man. He went to prison because he shot him with hollow points within the city limits. And hollow points are not allowed to be used in the city limits of that city. So you must make sure when you have a gun that everything you're doing is legal, because you could even be right in protecting yourself and still be considered a criminal and have to do prison time even though it's your own weapon and the weapon is legal. You need to make sure, according to states' rights, that you are properly licensed and educated on how to use the weapon in a professional way. You know, a lot of people have guns and they've never shot a gun in their life. Dear God, if somebody did come in their house, they'd probably kill their family first. You need to find some place to go shoot a gun. Get comfortable with that gun. Learn how it loads. Learn how to fill the magazines, how to change the magazines. Make sure the gun is oiled and it's in proper order. Make sure everything's above board. There's a state license. I think President Trump, if I'm not mistaken, is going for the Constitution being our license, and nobody should have to have a license for the state, because the Constitution already tells me that I have a right to own. I'm a law-abiding, tax-paying citizen. I already have a right to own a gun. I got a right to carry that gun, and the state shouldn't have any authority over that. Now, I'm just getting started. I'm trying to get you to relax a little bit. You need to settle right now within your heart, and this is where, being on the other side of the gunpowder, I know what I'm talking about. You need to settle right now within your heart if you are really willing to live with the fact that you would take a weapon and injure somebody or take their life. You need to establish that in your own heart and your own boundaries, you need to establish that now. The reason being, it happens so fast that you will not have time to contemplate whether you're comfortable or not if the situation should arise. If somebody was coming in your window in your home, are you sure that you're comfortable with taking a lethal weapon and applying it to that individual and maybe depriving them of life? That's something you got to settle in your own heart. And I'm sure if I opened it up for debate, many of us would have different answers. But settle that for yourself. Before you ever use force, remember this. Don't hurt somebody just because you're mad or you want to get revenge. That's never a right time to use a lethal weapon because you have a personal vendetta against somebody and you just want to hurt them or bring revenge to them. That's never right. You need to learn discernment. For instance, if somebody was breaking in your house and you seen them and you approached them with a gun and they took off running out of the house across the yard, are you still going to shoot them? Some laws, including the state of Tennessee, I believe, the transgressor has to be within the premises of the facility before you shoot them, and it's considered self-defense. If you shoot them as a predator out in the yard, then you have got a major legal battle ahead of you. So if somebody does break a window out and they stick their head in your house, they see you come up with a gun and they turn and run, are you going to shoot them? Or are you going to give them an opportunity to flee and maybe second guess ever doing that again? Again, that's something that you have to decide in your own heart. And always remember this. As born-again Christians, our first defense is not a pistol. My confidence is not in a gun. My confidence is in the Lord Jesus Christ. He is our protector. He is our shield. And He is our butler. Now, just to clarify, people come up to me all the time. Are you carrying a gun? They ask me that all the time. You carry a gun? Here's always my answer. Keep your nasty, filthy hands off me, and you will never have to find out if I carry a gun or not. Just keep your nasty hands off me. So, when is it right to pick up a weapon and defend yourself? I'm going to mention three. Please sit back, take a very deep breath, keep both your feet flat on the floor. There's three times biblically I want to go with the Bible. I don't want to go with just what I think, and I don't want to go with just what you think. I want to go with what the Bible teaches, because the bottom line, if I ever have to use force, this is what I got to give an account for anyway. Number one, it is right to defend yourself with a weapon when our freedom is being challenged by a foreign nation. Sometimes a country must defend itself from other foreign nations overtaking our sovereignty and our independence. War is a horrible experience and should be the last resort of protection. But in some cases, it's the only means of national survival. I disagree with politicians. I believe personally, and this is an insert, once war is declared, our nation should never settle for less than anything than total surrender and victory to be accepted. I don't think it's right to take our men and women. It is not right to take our men and women and throw them on foreign soil to risk their lives and 5 years later decide we don't want to be in the war anymore and just pull out and nobody's a winner. If you do that, I promise you, you will have to fight that nation all over again. If we're going to go to war and it ought to be the last result, we should go and say we're not stopping until we stop this nonsense and we leave here. That's right. Amen. Vietnam was a disgrace that we sent hundreds of thousands of young men and women fresh out of high school to a jungle and told them certain places they couldn't shoot, certain places they couldn't bomb, and gave the enemy refuge and never let them finish the war. When we put a uniform on them and a rifle on their shoulder, we ought to told them, go over there, shoot anything that's against us, and we're going to finish this thing before we ever come back home again. Finish what we started. It's political nonsense to throw our country into war, fight for years, lose billions of dollars and thousands of lives, only to retreat and come home and nobody be declared the winner. I remember going to a veterans hospital, and there laid a man with both his arms blowed off and one of his legs from Vietnam. He was experiencing repercussions from Agent Orange. He had stepped on a bomb and it blew him all to pieces. He only had one eye. And I went up to his bed and I thanked him for his service. Because shame on America that when these soldiers come home, we called them baby killers and didn't give them the rightful return home that they deserve. And I leaned over that battered soldier and I kissed him on the forehead and I said, "Sir, thank you for what you did for our country." And he looked at me and I'll never forget what he said. A one-armed man, no arms, one leg, excuse me, and one eye. And he looked at me and said, "Preacher, if you'll design a wheelchair that I can drive with my tongue and somehow put a machine gun on that wheelchair that I can press the trigger with my toe and send me back to Vietnam, I'll finish what I started when I was a 17-year-old boy." And I said, that's what you build America with. That is what built the United States of America. And I want to say to every Vietnam veteran here and abroad, welcome home, job well done. You did what you were supposed to do. You are an American hero. The gift of life and a just cause is precious. And to settle for compromise or a temporary agreement is only to meet the enemy again. If you don't defeat them, they will come back for another round. I want to say to all you conscientious objectors, somebody asked me, what is that? That's a man with a yellow stripe about that wide down the middle of his back. If America's not worth fighting for, she's not worth living in. If you won't fight for this country, you ought to pack your duds, get your tail out of here, and go find you somewhere else to live and leave our country alone. America has survived the test of time because her people loved liberty more than life, freedom more than tyranny, and a brighter future more than immediate gratification. You got to stand up for your country. You say, well, America's not perfect. There never has been a perfect country, and there never will be. But she's the greatest this world has ever known, and I'd rather be an American than a citizen of any other country in this world right now. Israel wasn't perfect. Saul was the king. Israel had a lot of problems. But when David was a 17-year-old boy, he stepped out on the edge of a hill, and there was a big 12-foot uncircumcised Philistine cussing God. And David looked at the army and said, wait a minute. This fella's challenging our country. The Philistines are going to take over Israel. Don't you know some of the liberal parades that were passing by David? Talking about how Israel wasn't perfect and the imperfections that Israel had. And they were honest. Israel had a long way to go with God. But it was still the greatest nation that world had ever known at the time. And David said, I ain't fighting because she's perfect. I'm fighting because she's the best there is. And he took a sling and went down in the valley, and you know the story. He hit Goliath, and it went in his brain, and he cut his head off, and he carried his head through the streets of Jerusalem. It shows us from King David's life that a country's worth fighting for. I remember in 1991, and some of our members here, Miss Boy and others, laid in the desert. Stand up, Miss Boy. She fought for our country and laid over in the desert. We thank God for you. And her husband spent 22 years in the military, Brother Boy, and we love him. And one of their grandchildren, one of Brother Bobby's grandchildren, graduated from West Point. And so this is all military family. And they went over there, and I'll never forget in 91 when they went in on Desert Storm the original time, my boys were teenagers. And Brother Cliff, I'm the only one that could carry on the family name. Me and my brother and I were the only two that came through the Kidd family in my generation and his. And my brother only had one child, and it was a girl, so it was left up to me to carry on the Kidd name, or it would be vanished forever. So I married my wife, and she has two girls. We have two girls back to back. So I set her down, and I said, now look, something's got to give here. I'm outnumbered already. I've had all the girls I want. You either give me a boy or I'm divorcing you and finding somebody who can give me a boy. So we had our oldest boy, Philip. And Paul, where did he come from? I don't even know. Oh, that's right. We found him under a log somewhere. I think that's what we told him. And then my wife gave me 2 boys. And I remember they were teenagers back when the war was breaking out over in the Middle East, and we didn't know what we were going to do. And I remember they sent out information that if they were the only ones that could carry on the family name, that they were exempt if the draft, Brother Joe, should be reinstated. They were exempt because they were the only ones that could carry on the family name. And I remember sitting down with both of my sons, and I said, now you listen to me. You are no better than anybody else's son. And I love this country as much as any other human being that lives in the United States of America. And if you are going to back out of fighting for this country because of these terminologies, you get your clothes and you get out of here, because I am totally ashamed of you. I want you to go through boot camp, get you a rifle, everything that's got a diaper on its head, shoot it! That's what I told him. I said, if you die on the battlefield, don't you dare come home with a bullet in your back. You come home with a bullet in your chest, you make them suckers look you in you God-given eyeballs, and I'll bury you like a hero, and I'll see you on resurrection morning, and I'll think of you every day of my life. But I'm telling you, thank God for moms and dads that were willing to send their kids to fight for this country and got them back in plastic bags and metal containers, but they still love America. And we got the freedom we have right now because of men and women that sent their children to defend this country. And brother, I'm not giving up now. When our freedom is challenged by another country, we have a right to defend ourselves. Number 2, when this country forsakes the Constitution, we have a right to defend ourselves. Our forefathers gave us a legal checklist to keep those in governmental powers in check. Accountability was given to our leaders by the people of the land. And here's what the Constitution says. If the powers that be should dare stray, replace, or delete the Constitution, the people of this country has the power to rise up in a militia and force this governing body out of their place and sanction and replace a new governing body that's true to the statesmanship of the Constitution of the United States of America. Now, I didn't say that. Your forefathers said that. Now, here's my question, and here's where I'm going to lose half of you. If our government is not doing anything behind our back that's wicked, then why do they want my guns so bad? Why don't you leave my guns alone? My guns isn't doing anything to you. You don't even know if I have one or where they're at. But all of these laws that are coming in, one of the people that are running for president has already put an individual in charge of the gun laws of our land, and he has said he is going to take all semi-automatic weapons from everybody in the United States. You know what I say to that dirty, rotten, egg-sucking liberal? Good luck, Jack, because you ain't getting my guns. You're not getting my guns. And you're not buying them back, and I don't want your money. One of the reasons why our forefathers said we are to keep weapons is not only to protect us from the fear of a corrupt government, but also the intention on infringing on our rights, our privacy. I have a right to have a gun in my home. I have a right to have a gun on my body. And if you feel the same way and you protect yourself and you keep your hands to yourself, then guess what? Nobody gets hurt. But when you take all the guns from the land, the only people keeping them are the criminals. The honest people give them in, and then they got free reins to totally take over the government. They're already trying to do away with police. They won't even let the policemen, for God's sake, protect themselves anymore. We got people here that work for the judicial system, and my heart goes out to you. Before it's over to all these bunch of liberal idiots in Washington, the only thing they're going to give you to protect yourself, bless God, is a Nerf gun. They're trying to. I told you I'd start thinning them out about right here. You having weapons of protection doesn't make me afraid of you. My neighbors have guns. If they do, I'm not afraid of them because I'm not doing anything to bother them. And the fact that we have got an all-out war trying to take my gun shows me every communistic war, every dictator in every country, the first thing they did was take their means of protection away from them. And I say to you, dirty, rotten, egg-sucking liberals, and everyone that voted for you, dirty, rotten, egg-sucking liberals, you are not getting my gun. You're not fooling me. I know where you're headed with this thing. I'm going to protect myself. I'm going to protect our country. I am for peaceable protest. I believe, according to the First Amendment of the Constitution, anybody has a right to peaceable protest. That does not give them the right to go into town with ropes and bands and start tearing down statues and writing filthy language on a courthouse and destruction property and breaking into stores and looting them and burning them down. That is not a constitutional right. Every one of them are criminals. They are criminals, and they ought to go to jail. But we have so forsaken God and the Constitution. Here's what I want to tell you about our government, and I quote, I do not trust this government enough to hand over my guns to them or to protect me in the time of need. I do not trust them that much. I will never trust them that much. I'm going to trust what God has given me and the ability to defend my family, my country, and what He has blessed me with. Now, it is a biblical right to take the nation away from a governing body and give it back to the people. You remember Saul was the first president or leader of Israel. And Saul had done that which God had told him to reject. And he embraced the Amalekites. And Samuel went to Saul and said, God has rejected you. And Saul said, you can't do that. I'm the president. I'm a senator. I'm on Pelosi's team. Chuck Schumer's my boss. You can't set me aside. I speak with Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson. You can't put me aside. Yeah, I know I'm preaching. And brother, the Bible said God has taken the kingdom from you and had given it to King David instead. It is a biblical truth that when a nation deviates from its founding constitution, the people of that nation have a right to rise up with their weaponry and consider them the enemies of our country and run them out of Washington, D.C., and send them liberals back home again. Now, let me say this before I go on, because I'm losing a lot of you quickly here. Don't stand up and clap for me, you hypocrite, if you're not a registered voter, because I need you to go to the voting stand and vote them suckers out of there and throw them out of Washington. Every one of them need voted out. Now, I'm a preacher. I'm not a politician. So I can't tell you who to vote for. It's none of my business. You just need to vote. You vote for the Republican of your choice. I don't care which one it is. Number 3, and I'm done. Not only when they forsake the Constitution, but when your family's safety is compromised. Parents have a God-given right and responsibility to protect their family and their belongings. It's not fair that thieves and crooks have more rights than property owners that have worked hard, paid taxes, and planned for their future. Once a person crosses onto somebody else's property, has taken merchandise that doesn't belong to them, or tries to enter a house by force, that person has forfeited any and all laws that protects them and their existence. From that very moment, you become a criminal when you unlawfully go to somebody else's property, damage their property, or try to enter a building. And the law carries the potential of you losing your life and it being justified. Now, let me clarify again. I am a preacher. I don't want to hurt anybody. I have spent 2/3 of my life. All I've ever done is want to help people. I love people. I've given my whole entire life just to help people. But if somebody breaks into my home and my wife and my children and my family is in that home, When you stick your head in that window, you better give your heart to God, because your rear end belongs to me. I will shoot you. Now, I know this is too tough, and I know some of you aren't coming back, and that's fine. If you want to meet them at the door with cookies and milk like Santa Claus and let them rape your wife and kill your kids, that's your business. They come to my house, the only thing they're leaving with is lead poison. That's the only thing they're leaving my house with. You remember in 1 Samuel chapter 30, David came back from fighting with his men, and he came to Ziklag, and they found out that they had burnt the town down, Brother Ball, and had taken his wife and kids, and had burnt Ziklag down to ashes. And David went and prayed and said, God, what do you want me to do? And God said, I'll tell you what I want you to do. They've messed with your wife. They've messed with your children. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to go through the desert. I'll have an Egyptian there that'll guide you. I want you to find them, and I want you to kill every one of them for messing with your family. God sent out a means of protection for a man to guard somebody that's protecting his family. Let me illustrate. In Mississippi, a man came to a meeting I was in. Him, his wife, his daughter, and his blind teenage son. And after that meeting, they drove 3 or 4 hours back home. It was a camp meeting style service. And when they got home, what they didn't know was there were 3 young men hiding in the closets of their home. They had broke into their home while they were gone. They'd been staking out the home. They knew the family, and they knew the family was going to be gone to the meeting I was in that night. Upon entering the house, one of the men jumped out of the closet with a knife and put it to the throat of his wife and said, if anybody says anything or tries to move, I'll cut her head off. At that time, the other 2 men come out of different closets with extension cords they had found. And they tied the daddy, the daughter, and the blind son to each other and set them on the couch. And all of them repeatedly in front of them raped his wife. The funeral director told me that he tried so hard to get his hands loose, the husband, where they had him tied. He said, preacher, he tried so hard to get his hands loose that the extension cord almost ripped through the arteries on his wrist. Sitting there watching these infidels rape his wife repeatedly, and then they beat her brains out with a tire tool they had found in the garage. After that, they released the little teenage girl and did the same perversion that I wouldn't even mention from a pulpit. And while the blind son sat there screaming and crying for what he heard, a daddy had to watch his own daughter be raped and killed. When they were done with her, they sat and drank, smoked pot, laughed, and did the same to the blind boy. Raped him repeatedly, and then beat his brains out with a tire tool. Last but not least, they tortured the father in ways that I wouldn't even mention, but it was so perverted that even the investigators could not believe it. And those 3 young men set the house on fire after mutilating a whole Christian family. But somebody had saw that something wasn't right in the family. That just something wasn't right that night. So one of the neighbors called the police and asked them to come by because one of the doors of the car had been left open. And the police came by, and those 3 men, drunk and high, were sitting in the front yard watching the house burn up of the 4 bodies they had raped and mutilated. The policeman said when they got there, the 3 men were laughing so hard at what they had done that they could barely stand up. And he said, Brother Kidd, I know this wasn't right. But he said, when I got out of my car and we realized what was going on, he said the sweat began to run down my body. My uniform was soaked. Those 3 men were sitting on tree stumps that had been cut down, laughing and joking. He said, I pulled my gun and I said, please run. Please try to run. He said, I wanted to kill those men so bad because of what they had done. It would have been a different story, Brother Guy, if that daddy would have walked in that house. All they had was knives and extension cords. If that daddy would have had a simple little pistol on him, I would have told that daddy, put a hole in every one of their heads, kill every one of them, shoot every one of them. Every one of them deserves to die. I'm telling every one of our young people, you keep your hands off anything that's not yours. You stay out of people's vehicles. You stay away from their cell phones. You stay away from their purses. You stay out of their garages. You stay out of their houses. You don't ever peek through somebody else's window. You don't ever fool with somebody else's property. You keep your hands clean. You be above reproach. You stay out in public. You stay out in a lighted atmosphere. And don't hang around with people that go to other people's property and abuse something else. It'll get you in more trouble than you can ever get out of the rest of your life. I'm closing. I understand I got some bleeding heart, dirty, rotten, egg-sucking, pooch-lift liberals here today. I understand somebody's going to get in their car and say, all that preacher wants to do is shoot somebody. I have no desire to shoot anybody. If I did, I'd tell you, because I ain't afraid to tell you exactly how I feel. But I'll tell you one blessed thing. You fool with me, you'll wish to God you left me alone. I tell you that much right now. So does God believe in fighting? Well, the Bible says when Satan was cast out of heaven, the Bible says there was war in heaven. There was conflict in heaven. But the greatest war that's ever been fought is the one I want to close with. 2,000 years ago when Jesus went to the top of the hill, that was the greatest battle of all ages. All the demons and imps of hell gathered all of their equipment, all of their regiment, all of their troops, all of their soldiers, and they danced around the bloody hillside as Jesus' head fell to a lifeless chest, and he gave up the ghost, and he died. And all the demons chanted and cheered and raised their weaponry in triumph and victory. They laid him in a borrowed tomb that didn't even belong to him, covered it with a stone, and said, it's over. Finally, we've defeated the Son of God. But on the third day, when they thought he was over, in come a wind from another world. And Jesus stepped out of that tomb alive and well. And he's got the keys of death and hell in his hands. He's the great victor. He's the great conqueror. He's still the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Let's give the Lord a hand clap of praise. Wow. Thank you. You can be seated. Thank you.
These are the days of Elijah. Declare